All right. So good to see you all this morning. This morning I want to invite you to just think back over your life and maybe think back over several events that changed your life, that had a severe or a significant impact on you. Just take a few moments and just think about those one or two things that might, I'm not going to give you examples, but I want you to think of yourself. Just think of one or two events in your life that had a profound impact and changed the course of your life. If you would just do that for a second. Now you notice in your bulletin, there is a place, an insert, and there's a place for you to actually write those down. And I encourage you to do that because it'll help you follow along with the sermon and fill in the blanks in one preaching. But here's the important part of this, is that I want you to really think about those two or three things that made a difference, that changed your life, that changed the direction of your life. Maybe it happened in one direction, and later on in life something else happened. Because every one of us has what I like to call a defining moment in their life. At least one, many more maybe. And these moments permanently imprint us, and they end up shaping the way that we respond to future events as well. We rarely get to choose the time and the place of those events, but make no mistake, these events are very profound. They make course corrections in our lives. And they literally define our destiny. They define who we are. So some people would call them a breakthrough. But really, it's when the status quo of your life gets disrupted and something has inserted itself in your life and changed the way that you see things and do things. So I want to give you the definition of a defining moment, because this morning we're going to be talking about defining moments. And a defining moment is that event or choice that sets our course in life in a new direction. So think about those events that I had you write down. Did they change the direction of your life? Of course they did. For some of us, it might be that moment when we graduated high school and we left our hometown for what we thought was for good. Or maybe it was that first touchdown that you scored in high school, or that first serve you got over the net in volleyball, or that first moment you began to believe in yourself and unlock your true potential. And yet others, it might be a spiritual experience or an encounter with God in which God became more real than the person sitting next to you. And a moment that changed your worldly perspective into an eternal one. Denzel Washington in the movie Fallen said, "There are moments which mark your life, moments when nothing will ever be the same, and time is divided into two parts, before this and after this." That's what we call a defining moment. And every one of us has had them. And so we're going to be talking about it this morning, because we're going to be looking at Exodus, where we've been kind of camping out in the book of Exodus. And we're going to look at Moses and how he had several very defining moments in his life. So if you have your Bibles with you, or you can look at the screens, we have Exodus chapter 2, verses 11 through 22. Or you just follow along and read it. One day, after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew and one of his own people. And so, glancing this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. This is one of three encounters or narratives in which Moses faces what I call conflict. He sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, and the scriptures tell us that one of the important details, he recognizes this Hebrew person as one of his own people. Now remember, Moses was raised in Pharaoh's household. He had all the privileges of royalty. But he was still an outsider, and I guarantee that the people of Pharaoh's family knew that he was kind of an adopted son. He wasn't a legitimate son of Pharaoh's daughter. And so as a consequence, he probably was never treated with all the dignity that other people would have been treated with. But Moses, in the middle of all this, he sees something happening, and it's an injustice occurring. And for some reason, when he sees this Egyptian beating his Hebrew slave, he strikes the Egyptian and he kills him. And not only that, he buries him. Now, he knows what he's doing is wrong, even if the Ten Commandments haven't been written yet, because it says that he looked this way and that way. So he was paying attention to his surroundings. He didn't want to get caught. He knew what he was doing was dangerous. We know nothing about the Hebrew that was being beaten. He may have been the only witness to this murder. And then we ask ourselves, well, why did Moses do this? Did it arise from his sense of justice? Some have gone so far to say he was deliberate. He was acting out of this role of deliverance. He saw himself as a deliverer for the Hebrews. He was trying to fulfill his purpose in life, but the only problem was he was going about it the wrong way. And this brings up an important follow for us as followers of Jesus. Did you know you can be right and still be wrong? This is one of your points of your bulletin, even though we don't have that one. You can be right and still be wrong. Has that ever happened to you? You can be right about something, but go about trying to fix it the wrong way. Jennifer jokes with me that I walk on the walk sign in Denver without waiting for the traffic to stop. And she says, I say, well, I'm on the right. And she says, yeah, but you might be dead right. And she's right. She protects me. Think about the day that think about how we deal with morality or people who are far from God. We tend to think that it's our job to fix them because we know what they're doing might be unhealthy or bad for them. But the right thing, which is caring about them, sometimes is carried out in the wrong ways. Sometimes fixing them isn't the right response. Sometimes loving them and showing them that you accept them and you care for them is the right approach. And so we have to watch that we don't do things do the right thing the wrong way. So back to our story. The next day, Moses went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. And he asked the one in the wrong, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew? And the man said, who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing us the way you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and thought, what I did must have become known. When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live at Midian, where he sat down at the well. Moses has gone out from the palace, and again, he sees an injustice. He sees two Hebrews fighting. Now, the day before, he killed an Egyptian because he saw the Egyptian beating up a Hebrew. Now he sees two of his own people fighting. And so he tries to stop them. This time he doesn't use physical force. He just speaks to them. He says, hey, guys, stop this. And what do they say? He's powerless because his people aren't ready to have him become ruler and judge over them. They're not ready for a deliverer. In fact, the news gets out that he killed the Egyptian, and now when Pharaoh hears the news, he has to run for his life. He's branded a traitor, and orders for him to be executed are written. And so Moses flees. He goes east all the way to Midian, which is about a 300-mile journey across the desert. And he goes across the Red Sea, the Sinai Peninsula, and he goes to a place where Egyptian authority didn't reach, because the Egyptian authority was massive at that time. And then we pick up the story in Midian. Now, a priest in Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses got up and came to the rescue and watered the flock. When the girls came to reveal their father, he asked them, why have you returned so early today? And they answered, an Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock. And where is he asked his daughters. Why did you leave him? Invite him here to have something to eat. Moses agreed to stay with the man and gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. Zipporah gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, saying, I have become an alien in a foreign land. A lot of times when we read the scriptures, we miss so many details because we don't see the story behind the story. The scriptures are they're alive. They're so much more than just a narrative. There's rich treasures written in every word. And if you understand what happened here, Moses gets to Midian, and he sees at a well another injustice happening. He sees these 7 ladies, these 7 girls, probably young girls, trying to water their flocks. And some other Midianite shepherds are driving them away because they're saying, our turn, we're bigger than you, we're guys, we have first rights to the well. And so Moses sees this injustice and he steps in. It says he stood up and he intervened. And he told he stood up to a whole bunch of other shepherds by himself. Okay? He must have been an imposing person. And he, not only then, these girls, these 7 young ladies, he draws water for them, and he waters their herds for them. That's an act of service. Here's a guy coming from royalty, of privilege, where he's used to being served, and in just a very short period of time, he's starting to serve somebody else. He's seeing his role as something different. He's being broken. God is taking him down a couple steps. He's being brought down in his view of himself, and he begins to see himself differently. And so, these girls go back to their father, and they describe Moses as an Egyptian who had helped them. And so Moses is invited to join the family. He's given a daughter in marriage, and he settles there for what he believes is the rest of his life. Now you might wonder what Moses' defining moment was. Well, actually, it's all 3 of these events. Because these 3 events shape his personal identity for the next 40 years. These 3 events, these 3 strange interventions that he did, would shape the way that he saw himself, and he saw his world, and he saw people around him. We're told in the book of Acts that Moses was 40 years old when he killed the Egyptian. That's quite a long time to live in a time of luxury. I don't know what you were doing at 40, maybe you're not even 40 yet. But when you think about it, everything you've done up to this point has all, if you think about it, if you've reached 40 years old, you're doing the same thing you did when you were a child. I mean, basically the same lifestyle, everything else, everything's been the same. And at 40 years old, suddenly everything changes. It's a traumatic event. And this is Moses. He has spent 40 years in royalty, enjoying being in a royal palace, having all the privileges of royalty. And now he's on the run, living as a shepherd in the desert. We also know that he's going to spend another 40 years doing this. He's going to spend 40 years in this desert as a shepherd, living a shepherd's life. I don't know if you know what a shepherd is like, what it's like to live as a shepherd, but it's not like ranching cattle. Like sheep, you have to live with them, you have to sleep with them. It's not like you can just put them in a pen and go to your house or put them in a corral. With sheep, you've got to stay with them, and that's what that shepherd did. He would lead them into desert areas where there'd be grass, and he had to take them where there'd be water. And every day was a labor of survival for both the shepherd and his sheep. And this is Moses. This is his life for the next 40 years. You would have to learn survival skills. You'd have to learn how to pitch a tent, how to find water. He'd be responsible for carrying those sheep. But little did he know that God was going to use this as training for how to lead 1.5 million Hebrew slaves out into a desert that would be just like sheep. His entire perspective has changed. He no longer sees himself as this privileged guy. He doesn't even believe people will listen to him anymore. He's been broken in his self-reliance and his ability. This defining moment of his life has come and shook him. Now, when you have something that shakes your life, it changes the way you see everything, you see yourself. His very statement, I have become an alien in a foreign land. That's what he named his first child. I've become an alien in a foreign land. Isn't it kind of weird? I'd like to have that for a name. Yeah. But that's what the name of this child was. And so 40 years old is a tough age to make a change in life, a career path. And his circumstances were now leading him to be a shepherd. A few years back, I got a book called about pasturing. I've got to tell you the name of it. I hope you guys don't get offended. They smell like sheep. Talking about people. The pastor is responsible for shepherd. Because you know what? We're all like that. Every one of us. We all kind of go our own ways. And And sheep don't go where you want them to go. They want to go where they want to go. And so that's what we're doing. And so each one of us has had life changes in our lives that profoundly affected us. And we can be slaves to our circumstances and allow them to beat us down, or we can use them as springboards to take ourselves into a new stage of life. I read dozens of people's defining moments in this past couple of weeks. And the most striking ones were not stories of instant success, but rather ones that described a defining moment as being a moment of failure, a moment of just losing everything, or rejection that led them to a place of depression or hopelessness or even a period of darkness in their life. Have you ever had one of those? One of those periods where you just felt like you didn't have any reason to live? Some people have. But their defining moment was their response, because those events happened to them and they chose, something awakened inside of them and led them to choose their life differently as a consequence of that event. And it's that awakening that I want to address today, because God created each one of us in this room with a destiny and a purpose. He wants us to walk in the purpose that He created us for. Next week we'll find out how God awakened Moses to this destiny. But for now, let's talk about our own defining moments. I want to share with you a couple of mine, if I could. When I was a teenager, 13 years old. Everybody 13 years old in this room? Okay. I got sent to military school, boarding school, about 450 miles away from home. And spent 9th through 12th grade there for 9 months out of the year. And it was not fun. It was a very oppressive environment. I remember just how tough it was. But the first 2 years I absolutely hated it. I wanted to get out of there so bad, it was like unbelievable. We wore military uniforms and drilled and everything else. And being the smallest kid in the class, I got, in my age group, I really got the tough part when I came to hazing and bullying. But I pressed into my studies and learned that I could be promoted, I could advance in school by excelling on my studies. And so my response to my difficulties, the response to the challenges, was to find an avenue to be able to succeed in that environment. And one of the things that I learned from that experience, those 4 years, was that there was nothing I could not do if I put my whole heart into it. The next defining moment came when I was 25. I overheard the gospel in a restaurant, and I found that I needed to know God, the God they were speaking of. And so after an encounter with God and a few great mentors that God placed in my life, I began to live my life with a sense of purpose and eternal perspective, instead of just pursuing another relationship after relationship or paycheck after paycheck. Most of you can probably guess my next most defining moment. She's sitting in the room, my wife. And she was a very defining moment. She's still a defining moment. She's one that just keeps on giving. And every conversation can really be a shaping moment for us. We have people around us that care for us. And I've had dozens of defining moments since. But I also had a Moses moment in my life at the age of 40. That's why I relate to Moses so well, because he had lived a certain way at 40 and had this change. I was almost done with seminary, having spent 10 years pursuing my degree at a seminary and running a business. So I was working part-time and actually working full-time part of that and trying to go to school. I had no promise of ministry. I hadn't even worked part-time in the ministry. I had only done volunteer ministry. And I was seeing my life as half over. When you hit 40, you start going through that midlife crisis. And I looked at my glass as being more than half empty. I thought to myself, what else is there? And so I also was in a relationship with two other men in my church where we had what we call an accountability group. An accountability group was where we got together every week and we shared our struggles in life and we prayed together and prayed for each other. And so with these two guys, this one day as we shared our struggles, both these guys were my age. Both these men had been in ministry, had gone through seminary when they were young, and had been in ministry and actually had washed out of ministry. They were no longer doing the pastor thing that they got called to. They were now doing manual labor in most cases. And so, as I was beginning to pray about it, I was complaining to God while we were praying one day. I was complaining in my spirit. And I was complaining that I was 40 and I hadn't even started ministry yet. And something powerful happened. In my spirit, I heard God whisper these words. Would you rather be 40 at the beginning or the end of your ministry? And I was rocked by those words. I felt humbled by my presumption and realized that God was speaking a word of promise and a word of destiny for me. That He had a plan for my life, and that my life would be a life where I would spend the rest of it influencing people's lives for Jesus Christ and for eternity, preparing people for living for eternity. And sure enough, God has been faithful. He's taken care of me. He's walked with me. I began to see that it doesn't matter how young or old you are when you start your next course, when you do this course correction, just that you be obedient to the call. Failure is not final unless you quit. And that's one of your points this morning. Failure is not final unless you quit. I wonder what defining moments you've had. What direction has God been pointing you in? Have you been listening? Have you been tempted to give up or give in instead of getting up and going on? Have you been wondering what's the use? Teenagers? That's anybody 13 or older. You are in what I call the cauldron of defining moments. You're in the pot where defining moments are going to happen. You are surrounded by choices, more choices than adults will ever have. And the ones you make will set your course, just like a compass on a map. And even though you can make U-turns later in life, it's a lot easier to choose the right course when you're young than try to make a U-turn when you're old. And so if there's anything that I have to say to you, this goes for adults as well, it's a lot easier to pick that right course down than try to turn around somewhere else. I don't know if you ever try to turn around on a narrow road. It's pretty tough to do. You do a 10-point turn and try to get everything. This is what ended up in the ditch. Well, that's kind of like life. It's tough to do U-turns. U-turns are available. It's a lot easier when you start on the right road. And to all of us here today, I want to ask you, in the context of God's invitation to relationship, this can be your defining moment as well. Your next point is this one. Jesus came into this world to be the defining moment for humanity. He came into this world to be the defining person for your life. That moment is sometimes we don't always pay attention. We're not always watching when it's happening. We're not always interested. We're not always open. But every person that's here today is here not by accident. You're here because God wanted you here. We talked the last couple of weeks about providence of God, how He directs our paths, how He puts us in the right place at the right time for the right reason, so that we are there for a reason. And if you're here today, you're here for a reason. You're not by accident. And I believe that God is seeking you. He's seeking you for a relationship. He's inviting you to have a relationship with Him. More than just talking to someone, talking to the air, but literally talking to a person who is alive, who resurrected from the dead, and who loves you and gave His life for you. He also promises to forgive you and allow you to become His child by faith. He offers the gift of eternal life that will begin the moment you begin to place your faith and trust in Him, and it never ends. The question is, how do you respond to this invitation? Will you stop and allow Jesus to take you on a journey that will change your life? What I want to do is I want to just lead us in a prayer. And if this is a prayer of your heart, I invite you to pray with me. Pray in your heart. So just bow your heads just a moment. Dear God, I need you. I know I've been keeping you at a distance. I've been filling my hands with other things than you. I've been trying to run my life my own way. I'm getting tired of running from you. I admit it. I need you. I want to know you. So I ask Jesus to be my Savior and Lord today. Forgive me of my sins, of my self-rule, and I surrender. In Jesus' name. If you prayed that prayer with your whole heart, you allow Jesus to be your defining life. You allow Him to define your future. Let me know if you've done that, and I'll be able to encourage you and give you some encouragement and guidance to take the next steps. So let's just bow for a moment of prayer, and then we'll take a walk. Father, we just acknowledge that we need you, and that we've all had defining moments, some of which we haven't really paid attention to. Lord, whatever those defining moments are, I pray that they would lead us into a place where we encounter you more fully than ever before.